So you've monitored and you've found mites. What are your options for dealing with them? Mite management can be a bit of a rabbit hole, but we're going to try and simplify it for you in this video. Beekeepers around the world have been dealing with Varroa mites for decades. And today there are a number of ways to deal with them. Most treatments are fairly easy to apply, and with a bit of help, your bees will be in the best position to tackle the mites. There are different treatment options and all of them have pros, cons and limitations. Things like outside temperature, colony dynamics, the season, your beekeeping experience, whether your super is on or not, and whether you want to use synthetic chemicals or not are just some of the factors we need to think about when choosing our mite treatment methods. A combination of different treatment methods is the best approach. This is generally called integrated pest management, or IPM, and each beekeeper can design a strategy to suit their own situation. You can use handy online decision tools, such as the one from DPI in Australia or the Honeybee Health Coalition in the USA. We've linked to those in the lesson resources. Now, beekeepers always like to experiment, but with any treatment it's important to follow the instructions on the label. In many countries there's a saying that the label is the law. Some beekeepers also like to join their local beekeeping club and do synchronized treatments with other members to better keep them on track. And it's really useful to monitor before and after your treatment to make sure it worked and your mite numbers are under control. And it's also really helpful to keep consistent records so you can start to see patterns over time. Timing is a crucial factor in mite control. Certain chemical controls work best in particular seasons. Many can't be used during a honey flow or with a super on, and some can't be used when the weather is too hot or too cold. Some only are effective when the hive is broodless. Also, if you're using non-chemical control options, timing is very important. Scheduling your manipulations to coincide with key points of the bee brood cycle, and therefore the Varroa breeding cycle, is crucial to the success of the control. Also, if it's cold enough in your region that the bees hunker down over winter, it's particularly important to make sure mite levels are low in autumn so that the hive will make it through the winter. Now, this is because it's not good enough just to have low mite numbers for the winter bees. To give your hive the best chance to overwinter successfully, you want the bees that are going to feed the generation of brood that will grow up to be your winter bees to be as healthy as possible. And of course, this means a low Varroa count in the autumn. IPM stands for Integrated Pest Management, and it's a key way that beekeepers manage Varroa throughout the year by integrating the various available treatment options. Some treatments and controls aren't as effective in certain circumstances, and it really helps to devise your strategy ahead of time. Here's the IPM pyramid. Just like the old food pyramid that we all know, the larger sections at the bottom represent options that are probably healthier for the bees, and the way that it gets thinner towards the top represents the less desirable options that we should probably aim to use more sparingly. The integrated part of the IPM is key because it's very important to rotate control methods. In the past, beekeepers have used the same chemical for a long time back to back, and Varroa mites develop resistance to that chemical over time. This happens because no chemical is 100% effective at killing every mite. The mites that survive a treatment with a particular chemical can be said to be resistant to it. They then pass on this resistant trait to their babies, which then survive the next treatment with the same chemical, and so on, until that chemical becomes mostly useless at killing the mite population. This whole resistance scenario can be avoided by swapping through treatment methods throughout the year. The aim of the game here is to take out the mites that survived a particular chemical with another treatment method, be it chemical or non-chemical. The integrated part of integrated pest management tells us to swap through our Varroa control methods to avoid chemical resistance in the mites, to keep mite numbers low, and to bring the best out of our colonies. We'll go through the IPM pyramid, starting at the top. As you can see at the top of the pyramid, the chemical segment is divided into hard and soft. This distinction refers to synthetic and non-synthetic chemicals. There are pros and cons to each of the categories. The so-called soft, non-synthetic chemicals may not actually be very soft on the bees, whereas the hard synthetic chemicals are very effective at killing mites but have other big disadvantages. To help you find your way through all these treatment options, we've made a downloadable table with some information comparing common treatments available through the US, UK and Australia. You'll find the link to this in the lesson resources. It includes the synthetic chemicals and also the non-synthetics, also called organic treatments. And please note, certain chemical treatments are prohibited in some regions, so check your local jurisdiction for more information. A synthetic chemical means a lab-made compound. It's not easily degradable or biodegradable, and it may contain hazardous substances that pose potential health risks to humans and the environment. Many are extremely harmful to both animals and humans, and we can think of them as forever chemicals that don't break down for several human lifetimes. Also, most of the substrates through which these chemicals are delivered into the hive are plastic strips, which also take a very long time to break down. But the upside of using synthetic treatments is that they are very effective at killing mites, and most of them are fairly quick and easy to apply. They also offer extended protection against Varroa infestation, often giving lasting protection of a few months or even more. Many beekeepers really don't want to put synthetic chemicals in their hives because of the downsides involved. For instance, residue builds up and stays in wax comb for decades. And it also accumulates in honey, which of course we eat. So due to this, most synthetic treatments can't be used when there is a honey super on the hive. This makes timing a really crucial factor and is also particularly limiting for beekeepers who live in areas with mild winters, where there's brood as well as nectar sources all year round, and their supers usually stay on. Crucially, if synthetics are used in an incorrect dosage or left in the colony for too long, or the same chemical is used over and over again, it can cause the mites in the colony to become resistant, as I spoke about before. This produces much hardier mites and eventually results in there being one less tool in the beekeeper's Varroa management toolbox. Because they're forever chemicals, the residue can stay on your equipment for years. And when the used treatments are disposed of, they end up in landfill. While they are still made in the lab, non-synthetic Varroa treatments are nature-derived chemicals, hence the name organic that many people know them by. They are effective, but most don't offer lasting protection against mites, and they may only be effective under certain circumstances. A big positive with the non-synthetics is that they mostly don't build up in wax or honey, and in some countries they're deemed safe to use with honey supers on. They also degrade quite quickly in the hive, just leaving behind the delivery material, which is often a biodegradable substance like cardboard or wood chips. Another plus is that while resistance to non-synthetic treatments is still a possibility, due to the way in which they kill Varroa, they generally don't seem to promote resistance such as the synthetics do. A downside is that these treatments can be hard on the bees, particularly the organic acids formic and oxalic acid. Formic acid is the only chemical treatment that is known to kill mites under the cell capping, and for this reason it's a very effective treatment. It does only last for a short time, around 2 weeks, so it doesn't offer the long-term protection against mite buildup and reinfestation like the synthetic products do. And as it's an acid, it can also be hard on the bees and the queen. Using formic products creates a high risk of queen loss, and if that happens, it can set your hive back and subject it to other pressures if it gets too weak, such as small hive beetles or other invasive pests. Formic treatments are temperature sensitive, and the risk of queen loss can be reduced somewhat by not using them in hotter weather. However, beekeepers find that sometimes queens can still be lost due to a formic treatment, even after following the label directions perfectly. Now, even though it is off-label and not officially allowed, some beekeepers do like to experiment in order to try and slow the rate at which the formic acid pads vaporize. They do things like reduce the surface area of the pads by covering them with the empty packet, or they put the pads in the tray of their flow hive. Reducing the vaporization rate might lessen the chances of queen loss and provide a longer window of protection, but it may also result in reduced efficacy of the treatment, and there's still a risk that the queen may die. Oxalic acid treatments only kill Varroa on the adult bees and not under the brood capping like formic does. There are a few options when using oxalic acid products. The drizzle method involves using a large syringe to drizzle a dosage directly onto the bees in between the frames. The treatment is dispersed by the bees coming into contact with each other while removing the treatment. You can buy a ready-made solution, or many beekeepers mix their own by combining oxalic acid crystals with 1:1 or 1:2 sugar water. You need to check whether this is legal in your region. The dosage, depending on the solution strength, is 5 milliliters of solution per gap between the frames, with a maximum dosage per hive of 50 milliliters. For vaporization, a special device is needed, like this one here. It requires power. This one runs off a power tool battery. To use this method, you will have to wear special PPE such as chemical gloves and a gas mask rated for acid gases. But despite that, it is quite easy to do the treatment and only takes around 30 to 40 seconds per colony. It's most effective if brood is not present. For instance, during winter when the queen has stopped laying, or when the treatment's combined with a queen caging method, which I'll go into later. But it is also effective when there is brood if done once a week for 3 weeks to cover a whole brood cycle. Oxalic acid strips are another way of administering an oxalic acid treatment. They're made from cardboard impregnated with a mixture of oxalic acid and glycerin. And this is a maintenance control. It won't bring a hive back from a large Varroa infestation, but it can be used to keep Varroa numbers stable over a period of a few months in a colony with a low level of infestation. The strips essentially buy the beekeeper some time in between other treatments or manipulations. For example, during a hot season when formic acid can't be used, or throughout a honey flow when you want to keep your supers on. There are several commercially available oxalic acid treatments designed for all 3 methods of delivery, including the cardboard strip treatments. But also many beekeepers around the world make their own strips or sponges. Oxalic acid is commonly available from hardware stores as a cleaning product, a rust remover, or a wood bleaching agent. Oxalic acid used for treating Varroa should be at least 97% pure. Different DIY methods can be seen on Randy Oliver's site, scientificbeekeeping.com. Now, in some countries and states, it's not legal to make DIY oxalic acid strips. So please make sure you check whether it's legal in your region, and always wear appropriate PPE when handling acid treatments. Thymol is another effective organic control derived from the oil of the thyme plant. But unlike the formic acid and oxalic acid treatments, it does taint honey and enter wax, so it can't be used with the honey super on. It's commonly sold as a product in a gel, but it can also be found in crystal form. And when it's put on the top of the brood frames, it releases a vapor, but it's then also distributed through the hives by the bees' cleaning behaviors. When it's used in bulk, it can be a little bit messy due to the dosage method, but for just a few hives, it's relatively easy. Now, it can also sometimes make the queens stop laying for a short period, but they generally do recover. Mechanical controls are manual colony manipulations that the beekeeper can do in order to reduce mite numbers. When used in conjunction with one another and at the correct times of year, these methods can be really effective and are also very inexpensive. Many beekeepers love these control methods as they are a way to combat Varroa without chemicals. A downside is that they can take more time to implement, especially if you have more than a couple of hives. And also the timing of applying these methods is usually critical. In some cases, such as drone brood trapping, if the timing is missed, it can even make Varroa numbers worse. These methods also need a certain amount of beekeeping experience and knowledge about bee behavior in order to be successful. A few examples of mechanical controls include screen bottom boards. With a screen bottom board, any mites groomed or falling from the bees fall out of the colony. This can be effective in conjunction with other control methods and can also be effective as a monitoring method. It may be necessary to use in conjunction with a sticky mat to stop any live mites that have dropped from the hive crawling away. These mats usually have grid lines, so it makes Varroa a lot easier to count. Now note that your flow hive has a screen bottom board directly in the base, and so these sticky mats can go straight into your flow hive tray or on top of the core flute slider. If you don't want to use a sticky mat, you may just want to use a thin smear of oil or Vaseline. Drone brood trapping, also called drone brood removal. And this method is very effective, especially when used in conjunction with other control methods. It does require quite a bit of manipulation and the timing is highly critical, otherwise you can end up actually breeding lots of mites instead of controlling them. To do this method, beekeepers will usually insert a frame of drone foundation into the brood box, just like this one. Of course, you will have to wait till it's fully drawn out. But once it's in the hive, the queen will lay drone eggs in these cells due to the larger cell size. Varroa much prefer drone brood to worker brood, so this frame attracts a large proportion of the mites that are looking to breed under the cell capping. Once this drone brood is capped, the beekeeper then removes it from the hive. The frame is frozen for 24 hours or melted down in order to kill all the mites in the drone cells. And this will of course also kill the drone brood. The frame can then be reintroduced to the hive so that the bees can clean out the dead brood and mites, and this can be repeated multiple times in a season to maintain a lower mite load. The bees generally only make drones when there are plenty of resources available and they are happy to expand their numbers. And drones are the first to go when times are tough for a beehive. So depending on your location, this method is generally effective in the springtime when there's lots of resources around for the bees. Now, as I said, timing is crucial with this method. It's important to wait until the drone brood is capped. Otherwise, the Varroa won't have entered the cells yet. If we count the day the egg is laid as day 1, drone cells are capped on day 10 and emerge on day 24. If the window to remove that drone frame is missed, you've actually bred mites in your hive rather than reduced them. So make sure you remove the frame at the right time. Now this method can be combined with a whole frame size queen cage, like this one, to give you even more control over the timing. The drone frame goes in here with the queen on it. So you've isolated the queen onto this frame to make sure she lays only on this frame. Now in a couple of days, 1 to 2 days, you come back and you take the queen out. And you can also take the frame out, put it back in your hive, and wait till this frame is capped. It just gives you more control over which frame the queen's laying on. If you've got a couple of hives and you need a bunch of those frame cages, it's really quite easy to make one. This is a homemade one. It took me about half an hour to make, just with some old queen excluder and some plywood. If you've got a jigsaw, then you can make one of these. An enforced brood break requires finding and caging the queen. It can be quite effective on its own, but is highly effective in conjunction with other control methods such as oxalic acid vaporization. It can also be combined into your spring management when making splits, simply by leaving either the parent colony or the splits to raise their own new queens. Now, this method of the brood break is actually echoed in natural bee behavior. Bees have a brood break after swarming, or if the queen gets killed and the bees make an emergency queen, or sometimes after the bees supersede an old queen. Now, the name of the game here is to give the colony a break from having any brood in it, which means there's no Varroa breeding under the cell cappings and all the Varroa are on the adult bees. To use this method, buy or make a queen cage that's suitable for this sort of manipulation, one that gives the queen some space to move around, but not to lay. The nurse bees must be able to access the cage so they can look after the queen while she's in there. There are several cage designs commercially available, but you can also make one cheaply by repurposing an old queen excluder. This one took me about 10 minutes to make. I cut the center out of a piece of wood and glued some old queen excluder on either side, and just got a plug in the end, whatever was lying around. The queen goes into that hole. You will need to pick her up, which is a downside of this method. But I recommend practicing on drones if you're not comfortable picking your queen up by the wings. Practice on some drones first. Put your queen in here, and then you can hang it in a frame, something like that. Now you leave her for 24 to 25 days, a whole brood cycle plus some. And this timing allows all the brood in the hive, including the drone brood, to go through the complete pupation cycle and emerge, meaning that all the Varroa in the colony will now be on the adult bees. This brood break on its own will help keep Varroa's numbers in check, but once the colony is broodless, it's also a perfect time to give them a dose of oxalic acid vaporization, which will kill a very high percentage of the mites on the bees. Once the queen's released after 24 days, she should resume laying normally, but it's a really good idea to come back and monitor how she's doing afterwards. The cultural control section of the pyramid refers to what we can do to help the bees to help themselves. I won't go into this too much, but it includes things such as using small cell comb, which has conflicting research in terms of its efficacy, and taking advantage of natural brood breaks such as cold winters or swarming. And these things can be interwoven into your general beekeeping IPM strategy. It also includes breeding from Varroa-resistant stock. There's a growing community of beekeepers worldwide who are choosing not to treat their colonies in order to breed bee stock, which are genetically resistant to Varroa mites. It's probably fair to say that most beekeepers would love to have Varroa-resistant bees. But if you choose to go down the route of breeding for resistant traits, it should be done with care and with awareness of the risks of losing colonies. If you go treatment-free by just not treating, not monitoring, and just letting the bees sort it out, it's an incredibly risky approach. It's best if any treatment-free strategy is combined with consistent monitoring, as well as some sort of breeding program to develop resistant genetics. We'll have more of that on another video. If you want a hive full of Varroa-resistant bees, it hinges on their queen. It's so great to make your own queens as a beekeeper. But if this really isn't your thing, there are plenty of queen breeders all over the globe doing incredible work in the area of Varroa-resistant genetic lines. You could consider asking your queen producer about the way they test for Varroa resistance as a trait. Even if they don't test currently, it may just spark the idea for them. Another method that beekeepers have been successful with is hyperthermia, or heating. Research suggests that heating capped brood to 42 degrees Celsius actually kills mites under the capping without using any chemicals. There are some commercially available products for this, and they can be very effective. A common downside is that the machines can tend to be quite large and expensive, and also require mains electricity, which not everybody has access to in their bee yard. But some beekeepers pool their resources together with their neighbours or their beekeeping club to share the cost, and they rotate the use of the product. Thanks a lot for watching. I really hope this has simplified integrated pest management and helped you find a way through Varroa management.